Have you looked through the history on that yet? We're good? Okay, excellent. All right, welcome. You're at the Hackerspace panel, which, as you can see, for those of you who arrived early, will be entertaining, if nothing else. I can't guarantee informative. Don't I get a point for that?
Yeah. On the board, all right.
So, I just wanted to what I'm going to do is, so we'll start with just quick introductions, let everybody kind of go and give you a little bit of their background for those of you who may not know. So I am the mastermind behind this panel, and now I'm starting to regret it. Yeah, it might. I think I'm the evil scientist. So basically, my name is Joey. Maresca, Lost Knowledge is my handle. I've been involved in 2 maker/hacker spaces. One that I won't mention by name because of fear from an over-litigious individual, and the other one I'm wearing the shirt for, Nova Labs, which is based out of Reston, Virginia. And so,
I'm Tim from Level 1. I love Level Hackerspace.
Tim, grab a chair.
grab a chair. Excellent. See, my failure to send emails does not mean that they're not here. Great. Oh, and look, we have hair. We can all we can take some from him later.
Okay, Fuzzy, you fucked up the whole board.
Now the audience knows which ones were the successful hackers.
So one that you had not worked with. So one of those you've not worked with. You're all dead.
Okay, so I will pass the mic down. Everybody can do their introductions.
Hello, I'm Dave Marcus. I'm with Nick Farr, one of the founders of Unallocated Space. I was also the second president of Unallocated Space. Unallocated was different because we had a very odd financial model. The original inception was only the founders would pay the bills, and then basically everybody else could be there just to come and hack and throw in donations and stuff like that. So it had a very different financial model, and it led to some very interesting discussions and its own unique set of problems. It was a good hackerspace. It's celebrating its 3rd year, so it's actually still in existence. Much to, I think, the founders' surprises, it's still in existence. It was a good place. It's good hacking going on.
Thank you, Dave. I am Nick Farr. I have been involved in a lot of different hackerspaces. I helped start HackDC and Unallocated Space. And if you go through the legend, mythos of hackerspace in the US, I put together the trip in 2007 from DerbyCon to the CCC camp, which a lot of journalists and a lot of people point to as the sort of 0 point for the hackerspace explosion in the US. And I've advised countless spaces on getting their 501c3 status from the IRS. Yes. Unallocated space is the only one that I haven't worked with yet, but that's another complicated problem with the exempt organizations office in the IRS. I also do a lot of hackerspace panels, not any of which have been trolled nearly this much, even though we've sat on stage together at DEF CON and other conferences. I give you that nice cold lead in.
Hi, I'm Skydog. I started the Hacker Consortium in Nashville, Tennessee with another gentleman, C-Blind. He's not here. He has a life, so that's why he's not attending another hacker conference. So the Hacker Consortium started somewhere between 6 and 7 years ago, depending on who paid attention when we signed everything. But we were one early on the scene, definitely. And we had a little bit of a different model. Ours was just don't pay much of anything, and we hope we can pay the bills. So I found that was that didn't work as well as
That turned out to be our model.
Is that what that is? Yeah. Yeah. So it was definitely an interesting ride. We've done a lot of fun stuff. It actually sort of, for a period of time, was sort of the launching point for Skydog, and there's another conference in Nashville, won't be named, but we used it to work on stuff there and get ready for the conference. And he's down, ladies and gentlemen, 2 points. All right.
sober.
Yeah, Dave gets a point for that.
Hey, watch my cable.
Dave Farr.
My name is Tim Miller. I'm from Level 1, which is Louisville's hackerspace. We've been around for a little over 3 years now. My main role there is probably making sure that bills are paid as treasurer, but largely we based our model on making sure we had enough money to pay the bills all the time.
Oh, it came out of thin air.
It happens sometimes, but
Also, what you guys pay for that hangar that you guys have?
yeah, we pay about $550 a month for our entire building.
After we're done with this, we're taking up that piece of shit. No offense.
Is that the interactive portion?
Yeah.
Audience gets a point.
We're going outside, we're not watching you, did you keep that? Joey? Carriage return?
All right. Okay, so I'm going to ask the panel a question, let them kind of go back through and provide a little bit more insight, and then from there we'll start taking questions, anything that you guys might have. I've got to get the picture, just be afraid. So, question for the panel, I guess, is based on the models that you based each of your spaces off of, what do you think the successes and failures of each of those models was?
Dude, we only got like 40 models.
Well, give one.
Don't give Dick the model. Just pass it over, Dave.
Nick is part of the failure model of any hackerspace that's had an issue, actually. So.
We have a round of applause for Dick Farr.
If you've ever been to a fucked up hackerspace, this man's responsible for it.
This started like 45 minutes ago.
We still have no content for our panel session here. I think the one thing I really learned through an allocated space was if you're going to found a hacker space, you're not going to lack for hackers. You're not going to lack for people who will donate stuff to you. You won't lack for technology. You won't lack for any of that stuff. What you need to think through your model at the beginning and how you're going to be consistent. One of the things I think we had a mistake with early on is we were not consistent in our classes and our sessions and things like that. We would come up with a great idea for a tool workshop or a great idea for privacy rights, and we wouldn't follow through consistently, I think, on a lot of stuff. Now that I've left, they follow through on the bastards. But my point is you will never lack for smart people in your area. I don't think that's a problem. You won't lack for cool projects, but it's consistent content and a consistent model of payment. That most people don't think that through. It's the business side of keeping the lights on, I think is something you don't learn until you're 4 months into your hackerspace, when your lease is running dry or something like that. So that's all I got.
The question is models.
Models never came by my fingers.
Well,
That's not true.
whether or not you have a model in your hackerspace, you have to have some way of getting the bills paid in some way for organizing how you do what you do in your space. HackDC, when we started, was just a pure membership-based model. If you wanted a key, you paid a certain amount. If you wanted a certain level of access, you paid a certain amount. And those amounts had to total up to what the bills were at the end of the month. And if you didn't make that, then you had to go to all your members and say, hey, we need to kick in an extra X amount to be able to make the rent. Every hackerspace that I've been involved with has a little bit of seed capital. People who are willing to put up, the first 2-3 months worth of expenses, get the lease signed, get the security deposit in, and start populating the space with things. Some hackerspaces have better luck than others selling equipment. One of the things we did at an allocated space before you were president was going out to flea markets and just straight selling a lot of the things that people have donated to us. If you have a guy that can sell things and convert old tech, because if you have a hackerspace, you almost inevitably will get deluged by useless, crappy hardware.
We would come in the afternoon and there would be shit piled up outside the garage door because people would come by and drop off pallets of stuff. So you won't lack for cool project materials and stuff like that. You'll lack for what to do with it. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and if you can find somebody that handles the waste problem. I mean, that's in the hackerspace design patterns, which if you haven't heard of, just Google hackerspace design patterns. There's a presentation by Jens Uhlig and a couple other people from Germany who had been working for hackers, who had been working on hackerspaces in their communities for the better part of a decade before, you know, us Americans came over. And they put together all this knowledge, and people have learned those lessons the hard way. They've taken those lessons to heart before they've started a hackerspace. And, you know, I think a lot of the conversations and a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about directly come out of those design patterns. The one slightly different thing is that in the US, your funding model should be based primarily on who you start your hackerspace with. When we started an allocated space, it was 6 guys. All of us had decent paying jobs, but not a lot of time. So the model that Dave was referring to, the key holder model, where you have 6 key holders who basically take responsibility for the space and split up the operating costs among themselves every month, worked for a time until interpersonal disagreements between that crew of people, you know, reared their ugly head, and we had fewer and fewer key holders, and then we had to convert to a more membership-based model, which is, I believe, what we're doing. Everybody, Aaron, if you want to raise your hand a little bit, that's the treasure of an allocated space right now. Give him a huge round of applause. Don't give him a point for that.
Does no one
No,
get
but-
that key joke? Does no one get that joke? Thank you.
Okay.
So give me a point.
So now you're the 2 people in the room that watch this show that's on TV, which is this thing that happened. Huh?
I don't watch it. Okay, I'll watch it.
Oh.
Oh, your TV.
I think the audience gets another point for that half point on Dave. But to get back to what I was talking about, the thing that I've learned, a uniquely American lesson from hackerspaces, is figure out who you're going to start your hackerspace with.
Sorry, I'm so exasperated having people flake on me.
What?
He was throwing a tantrum.
He was throwing a tantrum back there?
Sorry. Tell us about people who hack a space who flake. No, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, okay, yeah. And then
Now that Adrian's our video is gonna get fucked up.
You even left, bro?
so to close, so I can get the microphone over and stop being the target of the views at least. Yeah, that's gonna help. The critical American thing that we've learned is know who you're going to start and run the hackerspace with, and know who your audience is. The only other thing I'd have to say is hackerspace, makerspace, the terminology, whatever it is, unless it helps clarify to the community what you're doing inside your own hackerspace, the terminology is irrelevant. If you and a bunch of hackers are in a space sharing resources, hacking on cool stuff, it's a hackerspace, it's a makerspace, it's a whatever. It's awesome, or at least it should be.
So, one of our guys, Mudflap, got approached by someone in the neighborhood that said, "What do you guys do here?" Because the outside of the building we're in said AAA upholstery. But no one had been in the building like 4 years when we got there. And he's, so what do you guys do? And he looked at him for a second. He said, "Mental works." And of course, that was confusing enough to the guys like, "Oh, cool." And he, of course, walked away, which is the desired response. And the hackerspace, makerspace thing, definitely understand, because how do you describe exactly what you do? Well, it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. It's just a place where we hang out and do cool things. So you don't specifically have to get hung up on a name. So our model was a little bit different. We looked through 4 or 5 different actual spaces before we got to the one we were using. The 4 different iterations went successfully more expensive every time. The last one that I was looking at signing a lease on was $92,000 over 3 years. And I had a come to Jesus meeting and I said, look, if this doesn't work out, I basically have to move out of my current place and move into the hackerspace for the term of the lease, because if you haven't ever signed a lease on something like that, if you stop paying, they just sue you for the balance of the time left, and then the next month they lease it to somebody else and they get their money anyway, plus whatever you had. So I was staring down the barrel of that one and wasn't too happy about it. It would mean that our members were paying $150 a month, which we thought was outrageous. Now I think it's probably pretty affordable. But the space we had, the first 3 years was $1 a year. And the problem with that is we took a major shithole and had to convert it into a minor shithole to be able to work in there. We spent about 3 years completely rehabbing the entire place. So our model was, it was like $45, $50 a month, which was incredibly inexpensive. And during the summer months where it was nice and warm, we had a 5-ton moving cool that kept the place cool, but it drove the electricity costs up. So we pretty much just, during the summer months, we throw a couple $100 extra bucks in, and winter months, we'd make that back and balance out for the year. So ours wasn't as expensive as a lot of other spaces were, but we had a lot of the same problems. I think the big joke was, would it be cool if? That was the thing, the bane of my existence. Dude, would it be cool if we built a moat around the building? And you would have to look at someone and go, we're going to build a moat around the building. Really, anything that we modify the building, we're not painting it. No, we're not knocking down a wall and putting in a shooting range, But wouldn't it be cool? Yeah, it'd be cool if it was your dime that was doing that. So.
Two critical things that brings to mind. First of which, buy kilowatts, because you are going to have an argument over what's eating up the power of the space. Just buy a bunch of kilowatts and plug everything that pulls more than 2 amps into one of those things so that you know where your power is coming from. Second thing is, when those brilliant ideas happen and somebody's been drinking, lock the tools. Because I could easily see there's one person at an allocated space who, if we had said, we should build a moat around the space, would have started digging and been digging for like 6 hours.
He would have been occupied for that 6 hours.
He would be,
He was so stupid inside the space, set him on fire.
yeah, but he would have cost $7,000 of damage, which might have been worth it.
Yeah, I think the best one was when we were rehabbing the space. The back half of the building actually had a wooden roll-up door, but apparently that's a major security flaw in the building and the area we were in. So the guys who owned it had actually done wood screws or whatever and drilled it into the frame. So early one morning we were going to take that out and replace it with bric-a-block. And I happened to run to the hardware store with seed line and we were picking some things up and we came back and everyone in the hackerspace is standing outside the front doors, just milling about, which was kind of odd because they were supposed to be working. And I said, what exactly are you guys doing? And they're, oh, we're waiting. And I said, waiting for what? And the task we'd given them before we left, take a deep breath, was to take down the compression spring system for the garage door still in place. So what they had done, the first one they had cut with a hacksaw, which had whipped the cable over and took out my ladder. The next part of that was they had my propane torch, which was a welder's torch, a huge flame on it, and it was sitting right next to the cable, heating it up. And they were waiting for it to get hot enough to actually fatigue and give way. And they were all outside waiting for the bang. And as soon as they would go back in and everything, I'm like, we're out here waiting on what? So, and the best one, I actually go inside and the torch is there and the wire is red hot, but, oh, okay, this is great. Turn it off, and I said, you got a piece of rope, and I hooked it over the pulley and stepped on the end of it. Every bit of the tension came off. I said, you can cut the cable down. We never thought of that. Yeah.
Good stuff. Sometimes good solutions don't happen.
Level 1 did get a moat for a little while. We had a sinkhole right outside our front door, and MSD filled it with concrete, which included all the plumbing, so they had to dig up the entire street.
Nice.
Good stuff.
Moats didn't work out. Don't do that.
So what's the current model?
Current model is the membership driven. You member get a key to $50 a month, which we can do because of our rent, which is nothing. I'd say our main problem is we started with the illusion that you could have a topless model organization, and it doesn't work. Yeah, where nobody is actually in charge.
Why the hell are we in Europe?
12 blocks away. There are people sitting on the couch right now. You don't plug in.
Are they models? No, they're
Not topless. But yeah, going with any model that says that nobody is in charge is probably a bad idea, because anytime anything happens, somebody has to be in charge, really. If there's not, chaos ensues. People just will naturally just decide to cut down the garage door without thinking of, hey, we should put something in there first.
Curtis, do you have a question?
Yeah, I came in a little late. I assume you guys are operating as 501Cs, is that correct?
C3s, yeah.
501c3s. Have any of you all paired up with other 501c3s to try and share space? Because I know one of the things Mozilla does is if we have a space in the city, we open it up to the hackerspace. Like in Boston, we have a space, in Portland, there's one in San Francisco, one in Mountain View. Obviously, we don't have a whole lot of middle US, but I know that there are hacker consortiums that have gotten together with other not-for-profits that are like, hey, you guys can build really cool stuff that benefits us, so we're going to give you some space that you can use at least part of the time.
I got one. There's several like artist collectives and semi-hacker spaces in Louisville, Brick House, Mammoth, but they're different. There are different goals in mind. Sometimes we align and we work together or have the same goal, but for the most part, we want different things out of the community, and that's generally where the breakdown comes. Like an artist collective, they're more open to having people living there for small periods of time or long periods of time, whereas a hacker space, you don't want that. You don't want somebody living there. Because it breaks down really quickly on where the line is drawn.
I can't remember which model, 501c3 is charitable nonprofit, right? Yeah, I can't remember, I don't think we went that direction. Geez, it's been so long ago and I'm still sleepy. One of the problems that we had with that was anything that you acquire during that time, whenever, if you ever have to break apart the hackerspace, you have to give all the assets and things that have been given to you or whatever to other charitable nonprofits. And it's like, who are we giving HP plotters to? I mean, all the stuff that we obtained like that. So we were concerned about if we had to ever shut that down, the things that we had acquired, which actually never turned out to be anything. But, anything we acquired, who do you give some of this stuff to? You're like, hey, it's the Boy Scout troop. Here's a laser cutter and have fun with that. So,
Yeah. Well, and this is the accounting part of me, the assets, the net assets at the end of operations need to be donated to another charitable nonprofit. So you can sell everything to yourselves. It's moderate self-dealing, but if you offer the liquidation publicly of all of the assets, I mean, no, all you have to do is say, our hackerspace is shutting down, put an ad in the paper saying, we're selling everything, everything must go.
Yeah.
And if you guys are the only people around there to buy the things at the end, then, yeah, I mean, if you want them, otherwise, and that's another thing is all of this e-waste, sometimes because of the hazardous materials involved, has a negative value, that they're not actually assets, they're liabilities. Anybody who's got old monitors, things like that, none of those are ever assets, they're all liabilities. If you're gonna book them, yeah, exactly, if you're gonna book them, you have to book them as a liability because it costs you a certain amount to dispose of them properly.
actually, the best way we found to dispose of anything was to put it on the front steps and leave it. The worst one,
700 years later.
oh, no, as in you would come back later that evening and completely gone.
We never had that issue. If we left something outside the space and unallocated, when we come back, there'd be more shit on top.
Is that what?
Printer on top or something.
It's a point for that.
Yeah, you get a point for that.
It's going to be the opposite.
Ours, the worst one was, we had a bunch of tube TVs. When we first started out, we used the security monitors. We had like cameras on the outside of the building. So we pulled them out, and we cleaned them up. They're really nice, functional TV sets. And I came back the next day, and when sitting there, I thought, it's a huge Sony. And somebody cut the power cord off of it and completely rendered it useless. And I'm like, what douchebag cuts the cord off of a TV so it gets at it for a while?
Any other questions? So I think, Joey, we were gonna just kick this out to questions for the second half, right?
So if you have any questions?
So the 501c3 thing, talk about, so my hackerspace is kind of always questioning whether to make that legal or not. And you got half the members for not wanting to deal with it, and the other half the members like, yeah, let's do it until we get all this crap. So my job is treasurer as well, is,
Sucker.
yeah, I know.
Give that guy a round of applause.
So you mentioned liability, that's something I never even thought about, because I'm kind of against it, because I don't want to do paperwork.
That's a really good reason not to do that. I hate having to deal with paperwork.
Right.
But there's some reason to that.
Paperwork's easy once you get it.
Well, here's the other problem. The other thing, people resist the 501c3 status, or 501c, could be a C4 or C7, depending on how you're organized, but they resist that because there's so much paperwork involved initially. But once you do it once, your paperwork burden goes down to essentially zero. And NYC Resistor in New York found this out the hard way. I gave a presentation to them, and I said, the 501c3s, one, you have to have a charitable aim. You have to say, we're here to serve the community. We're not just here to have a space and serve ourselves. There's other 501s you can organize. But yeah, the paperwork burden is really hard initially. But what they're stuck with right now is they organized as an LLC, a for-profit. And the first 6 people that went into the LLC, only one of whom is now marginally involved in the space. But if they ever show a profit at the end of the year, the 6 people who were involved in the LLC initially have to pay taxes on whatever the profit is, and then the hackerspace has to reimburse them for the taxes, and then it becomes this ongoing annual problem where the paperwork burden is much, much greater than the paperwork burden for a 501c3, where you fill out, if you make less than, I believe, I have to double check the figures, if you make less than $25,000 a year, the paperwork burden is a postcard, literally. It's a 5-line postcard that you send in, or it's a 5-line web page that you fill out on an annual basis. It's nothing. If you're more than that, it's a 1-page form. And as long as you send it in every year, and they'll remind you, they'll say, hey, you haven't sent one in 2 years, would you like to send one? It's the nicest form letter you'll ever get from the IRS. But no, really, and they like, exempt organizations wants you to succeed. You can literally call them up and say, hi, I just took over a nonprofit and we haven't filed any papers in 5 years. And they'll be like, oh, that's great, let me tell you exactly what you need to do. So the paperwork burden for a 501c3 is much, much less after you get over that initial hurdle. And that especially anytime you're involved in a hackerspace, you should always be thinking about the future. You should be thinking about the people who are going to be involved in it when you're no longer involved in it. And one of the things that I say is get that, and I know I actually still have to do that with unallocated space. I'm going to give myself a point for downing myself there, but after you get over that initial hump, the paperwork burden becomes much less. And it's the same thing on the state side. Depending on what state you're in, the state will come after you for everything. I know Maryland is really bad about personal property taxes. And I filed one return because we have some assets that belong to the hackerspace that we have to file property taxes on. We actually pay a little bit every year because we don't have that status yet. But if you're worried about a paperwork burden, yes, do the 501c3, get over that hump, call me, if I can't help you, I'll give you a list of 6 people who might be able to help you. And odds are I probably will say, yeah, here's a list of 6 people, good luck with that.
I'd like to point out again, the point of this session is to advise you on why you don't want Nick Farr to be a part of your hacker. I encourage you all in the strongest possible sense not to let a fucking people call one of the 6 people you recognize. Don't do the same thing.
I'm the treasurer for level 1, and the hardest part of dealing with 501c3 is you have to track everything that comes in as a donation to make sure, because sometimes they don't allow, like they'll just put something that you can't use it for this, or it needs to be specifically used for purchasing this as a donation. That you have to track. Most of the time, our donation form we have to fill out just says at the bottom, we can use this for whatever we want.
Is it like for beer money?
If they don't tell us, it can be.
So how do you deal with the stuff that people drop off at the doorstep?
You don't. It's, as far as we treat it, it's trash that's been donated.
No, it works.
It's a value of 0 until it's been given a value.
And even then, resist, just 3 quick accounting hints. One, you should track where your donations are coming from, primarily so that you can ask people for more donations. Anybody that gives you $5, you could probably squeeze 20 out of at some point, and so on and so forth. The second thing is, do not
book any assets unless you buy them in cash. That's what I just strongly recommend. Unless you have a CPA who's telling you to do something differently, there's no advantage to booking any assets. So that the tangible value of any property, unless you bought it in cash, unless it's like if somebody donates you a Maserati and you need to keep it on your books, you probably can't keep it on your books for $5. But so what you do is you start taking apart the Maserati, and at that point, but yeah, there's no point in booking assets because that's complicated even if you're running a for-profit hackerspace. And the third thing, forgot what the third thing I was going to say is, but but do we have another question?
Yeah, I was wondering, is it different between corporate donations and personal donations?
The question was, is there a difference between corporate donations and personal donations?
As far as doing any paperwork, usually no. Corporation is generally bigger and they're better at actually doing any of the paperwork. But personal donations is generally a quick, here's money and run. But definitely keep track of who donated because they're probably not part of your organization.
Just one quick thing to add to that. Although corporations usually, or sometimes have you go through various different hoops to get it, and if it's worth it, go for it. Apply for the grant, jump through all the hoops. I know Microsoft really loves those stupid online forms that have to be signed, all this, but they send you a check and it's money. And then if they send you a check once, you can usually get a check out of them again in 6 to 9 months.
So if I can remember that. Yeah, see, so I forgot to. Yeah, no, we've actually had a lot of success with both individual and with corporate donations. I mean, we got our laser cutter through corporate donation. They gave us all the cash for it, so we were quite happy with that. We've done. We keep a safe up at the front and tell people just if they're going to drop money in to put a note on it so we know where it came from. But you know, it's just one of those things where you keep track of it. The other place we get it from sometimes too is we're still doing our 501c3. So we've actually partnered with I forget how it's listed, I think it's like as a approved program or something through School Factory, who is a 501c3. So they take 10% off the donation, and the rest comes to us if you allocate the money through them that way. And so we've managed to have people do large donations through that as well, so they can still have the write-off benefits while giving us donations while we're still going through our 501c3.
Question? Yeah, I'm trying to start a hackerspace as an extension
Why?
of my school.
Aren't you listening? Dude, haven't been listening. Look. You're just getting started. We've done this for a while.
I thought I asked a question. I'm trying to build it as an extension of my school club. I mean, I have a bunch of students in here. What differences would there be with my audience as a bunch of students that are going to be getting together?
They can't pay for anything.
Yeah.
Well, their parents are just paying for it.
No, yeah. And the interesting thing we've actually run into in Nova Labs is the second that all the homeschoolers in the DC Metro found out about us, we got overrun. I was actually talking to Skydog the other night about some of the things. We have 2 events today targeted towards kids and to a lot of the homeschoolers. So that are going on in Nova Labs today. And so it's just a lot of, you know, if you're targeting that group, I think the key is to target the parents. Because a lot of times what you'll also find is if the kids are interested, there's odds that there's some parents' interest too.
You're talking about university, college, yes.
College? Okay. Well, it's still poor. And
We'll have some high school voters.
I've actually, I'm the president of the computer security group at IUS, and we've partnered with our hardware hacking organization there, with Dr. Kimmer. A lot of things that you can do is I've applied for my first grant. I successfully got a $2,000 grant out of the school. Let me tell you, I had to charge, borrow, and then fill out a 17-page grant report for it.
I mean, the advice that I used to give when I started out with this was, you know, go out on your own, find people in your community, rent your own space, blah, 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 which was actually completely incorrect. The advice that I would strongly give to you is find a way to build a space inside your college or university that is student run. You know, just like the model would be the campus radio station, which is, you know, a couple of rooms in a studio that the students have run for time immemorial. It's the same kind of thing. Find a space that you can have in your university, pull in support, like, you know, network with other student groups, and if you can make it a common space administered by like the hardware hacking group and the security group, or, you know, CS students, other national organizations, if you can all partner and share that space and keep it an active, live happening space, that the university has basically said, look, this room that we've given you for space is filled with tools and it's a great student resource and everybody's hanging out there, and it contributes to the educational mission of the university. If you can do that, proceed with that route. And then just like the successful grants, the minute that the university is promising you a space or that you're lobbying for that, start applying for any kind of grants that you can. You can ask your student group advisory office, you know, we want to do this. What kind of grants can we have? Tweet out there to, you know, Jack Daniels, or I'm sure McAfee has student grant stuff. Yeah, exactly. Just start tweeting out there like, hey, I'm students, I want to pursue this. Where can I get some money? Because people love giving students at universities money. You guys are not hurting for that at all, and that's the route that I definitely recommend. And it's going to be a lot easier because when you graduate, you give it off to somebody else, but then you already have that built-in network of people that you've hacked on stuff with that might be outside your discipline or major that you might never have a class with, but then those are contacts that you have so that when you do go out and start looking for jobs and industry or internships, you have that built-in network, which is invaluable. You don't go to college for, which is another side thing, you don't go to college or university to learn stuff or go to classes. You go to college or university to meet your peers, to meet other people, to figure out who the smart kids are and where they're going, and figure out where you want to go with your life. And those friends that you make in college are going to be with you for the rest of your life. So get, like, anybody that you think in your class at one point said something that you admired, get them on LinkedIn, get them on Facebook, try to get to know them, because they will get you a job or you'll get them a job someday.
Yeah, so I've been involved in 2 hackerspaces, and I'm in the process of trying to start another one. Why? Because
First 2 up.
I've moved, is what happened. So I moved and fled. Well, yeah, fled.
Can we let anybody in the audience finish one fucking question?
So both spaces that I was involved in operated under completely different models. So the first one operated under the benevolent dictator model, right? Very strong personality, kind of ran the space, people kind of followed along. The other space operated under the duocracy method, which to me became nobody doing anything, is what duocracy seemed to become. And I mean, there was a very famous incident where there was a wall that was half painted because somebody decided they were painting the wall, and then somebody else came in and said, "What the hell are you doing? That's the worst color I've ever seen." A huge fight erupted, and that was where it stopped. There's literally a battle line on the wall where things stopped. But there seems to be a lot of appeal to people. People seem to like that, conceptually like that idea of the duocracy, and they seem to be, you know, that seems like, you know, the panacea, right, if we can get that. So I'm curious to know what kind of model from that perspective your space is.
The problem with the 2 different models is I did the benevolent dictator, but that also meant that if something went south, I got to be the one to talk to the cops.
Right.
The other side of that coin is what color to paint the bike shed. That's the exact problem you run up to, is people will fight over what color to paint that wall. It doesn't matter whether it's structurally sound enough to hold something up or it could be used for a particular project, but they will fight to the nth degree over the color of that wall because that's something they can safely fight over and go toe-to-toe on. So Yeah, I don't know which one works best.
This can just never ask anybody,
It never works.
do it as quickly as possible.
We had, the first space that I was involved in definitely fell under the benevolent dictator model, and I think benevolent would be a generous way of referring to the individual. It didn't work.
It doesn't work long term.
Yeah, it can't. Eventually, in the end, I think what we found when we started Nova Labs is we wanted a place that was community driven, where we did stuff for the people who were there to be part of the space, the ones who eventually became our membership. And so in doing so, we targeted, what equipment, what tools the people we want in our space want to use. And so we started with that, and from that we grew into having moments where people would come and they just come and do things. The biggest thing is just tell people don't start tearing down walls and doing anything destructive. But I mean, people come and work on projects, and we've done a couple of different times where we've had to do build outs and expansions, and we've had people show up in droves to come and help. To the point sometimes we've had to tell people, well, we have too many people, we can't manage this many people to do that. But the other side, you see, and I'm not even as old as you guys are.
Remember that conversation about?
I actually do have a serious point.
I'll forget it later.
Oh,
I have a serious point on it.
Look, you can't build a community with a benevolent dictator. Sorry, it doesn't work. It doesn't fucking work. It may work short term to just execute certain things and get 5 or 6 things done, right? The benevolent dictator comes in and says, we need to establish this, you do this test, you do this test, you do this test, you do this test. So operationally, it can be helpful for a short period of time. Until the benevolent dictator is no longer a benevolent dictator, it turns into this hackerspace is going to be my way. I contribute more money, therefore I have more to say. I have line item veto power, therefore it will be the way I say. And that just pisses people off because you're a douchebag. And you can't build a community around stuff like that. That being said, it's useful for small periods of time to operationally get things done. But I tend to the bureaucracy as well. I mean, that's what it's kind of about. It's a hackerspace. You're supposed to come in and hack shit up. You're supposed to come in and start a gazillion projects and finish one of them. And then all the rest of them are piled up on a corner table or something like that. That's kind of the point of it. And it's about making stuff, and everything else is to serve the point of paying the bills. It's not, the point isn't to pay the bills. That's a sideline if you have a good community that is coming in and hacking stuff and sees value out of their fellow hackers. They'll throw down $20, they'll throw down $50. But I think commitment's a strong part of it. But again, having a real strong person is, take you and cause more problems than I think anything else. The benevolent dictator thing doesn't work. The benevolent dictator thing doesn't work.
The benevolent dictator thing actually, like you said, works great up front because one, you've got to sign the lease. Someone's got to go out and find some cash. So yeah, after we got everything going, it took like 3 years to finish the space out, which I did many late nights doing wiring and everything else. After that point, you just step back and you just make sure no one burns the damn place down. So, I mean, I didn't walk in the door and say, hey, you're doing a project today. I was the guy who walked in the door and went, about the time you got here, how do you do so-and-so? You go, well, let me show you, because I know how to do, like, all this different random crap. But I think that it worked in the beginning for us to at least get started, because there's a lot of people that will show up and they go, hey, what do we do? And one guy, you loudmouth bastard, you go, well, guess what we're doing today? We're going to, and you just kind of have to make some things happen like that.
I don't disagree with that. I just think it gets to a point where there's a tone. There's almost a feel to the space after a while.
Yeah.
Of benevolent dictator douchebag. Okay, sitting in a corner, and it's going to be benevolent dictator douchebag's way.
I just don't want to burn the building.
It's not an easy thing.
Yeah, there's 3 things going on. Skydog is actually talking about a benevolent dictator where they're largely in the background. They set things up, they had the vision, they got the keys to the space, they opened it up, and then from there, their role was basically making sure nobody burned the place down. Dave is talking about a tyrant who was constantly in the space, constantly telling people, what they can and can't do, and even just by their presence,
That's a direct quote.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he's talking about somebody who is very dictatorial in every aspect of the space, which is not a model for success. But
Think about what it takes to make me annoyed at someone else's personality. Think about what that takes from me, for someone to actually be able to tell me what I can do and think about that for me. Someone who actually has.
all you have to do is sit to his left on the panel. To answer your question, there's again 3 points I want to make. One, you can always elect an officer, but you can't elect a leader. You know, leadership is something that you're partially born with, partially that you learn. And leadership is not barking orders at somebody. Leadership is finding the common path. The second thing is, you always have to have somebody who's the driving force to at least get to the point where you get the keys open. But from there, the ideal leadership is somebody that is really, like I said, really good at picking out the consensus. And the leadership should be rotating. At Hack DC, the first space I was involved in, when I started it and there was a cadre of people that got the space open, then another group of people who was way more enthusiastic about the space than I became took over. And that's the ideal situation, when your leadership is always rotating. And that's the thing. And then the third point is find what works for you, but if it's clearly not working, do something else. And do something else before it's too late. Because there are some hackerspaces out there that have tried to be, radically inclusive and not have leadership, but then end up having, if you want a perfect emblem of what a failed hackerspace is, join the Noisebridge Discuss mailing list. And yeah, that's right. And so that's what I had to add to answer that question. Do you have something to add?
So level 1 tries to run it into bureaucracy, but what it comes down to is you don't have any leadership at all, nothing is going to get accomplished because everybody will bicker all the time. And the leaders don't have to be your directors or the president. Some of the best leaders at level 1 have decided they never want to be in the official directorship.
Can we add something about the benevolent dictator?
I got the microphone, sorry, Jim. No, the being a leader doesn't always mean barking orders. Sometimes being the leader is the guy who picks up the first shovel. So it doesn't always mean you have to yell at everybody. You have to lead by example, which,
Yeah. So just one quick thing, and then will probably be our last question. Just the benevolent dictator, I think in the case of Nova Labs, I think if we hadn't been in that situation, we came out from another space. We had the benevolent dictator, and we knew we didn't want it. We knew it wasn't working. And so without, as much as it would probably pain some of us to admit it, without that experience, I don't think Nova Labs would ever have existed. Because then you would have been trying to bring these disparate people together who otherwise wouldn't have met if not for the original space. So that kind of allowed us to go in and say, we want a board model, we want to be able to have a chance to control as a group so one person can't take over. And then we also want to be able to have our members have say. And so there is a lot of that. We have monthly member meetings, our members come in and do a lot of discussion. There are still things we do through the director, but it is a much wider audience for our members. So last question, anybody? Oh.
Roshan?
Well, that's yours first.
James, earlier you used a word that I wish we could talk more about, commitment. Because personally speaking, I am a member at Arch Reactor Hackerspace in St. Louis. And what that means is I paid my dues once, I got a key, and I'm done. And so what I'm curious about just sort of how you can keep hackers committed, especially when they're like me and they like dodging drama nuclei.
That's a great point. I think probably my greatest failing during my time at Unallocated was a lack of consistency, both as a regular member and then as president, because I was in a different role and I traveled a lot and I couldn't be there for the amount of time that I really needed to be there. I think we also didn't have a really well-developed schedule of consistent activities, like a dedicated hardware night dedicated FPGA night, dedicated lockpicking night. When we ran them, they were successful and we would get new people in the door, but then the next month would come around and I or somebody else would have to travel and it would fall off the schedule and stuff like that. So I think it comes down to a well thought out schedule of content that is predictable. And that doesn't mean that's the only thing that your space does, but you know that every Wednesday night is your tool meeting, or every other Wednesday night is FPGA night, or it's Arduino night, or something like that. So you have consistent things that are bringing people in the door with consistent content, and then cool projects spin up off of that, and hopefully that keeps the drama down. But I mean, drama and hackerspaces go hand in hand. Just because smart people argue over things. You know, we're all smart. I'm smarter than you. I will argue it. My solution is correct. Your solution sucks, and therefore you should do my solution. There's always going to be a part of that. But if you focus on the building of the community aspect of it and focus on consistency and commitment, I think you minimize some of the other stuff. And my own failing was not having done that successfully.
If you're not hacking on stuff at least 90% of the time, then you're doing it wrong. And hacking on stuff can mean something as simple as, oh, there's some new crap that came in. I don't know what this is. I'm going to take it apart. I'm going to see if I can figure out what it is. It doesn't matter if you never figure out what it is. But if you're actually hacking on code or hacking on equipment or doing something like that, it's a hacker space. It's not even project-based. You don't. I mean, that's ideal when you have when you have something and you have an outcome. But as long as you're using the tools that are there, and I mean, then you're doing something. And then there's that middle space where you're playing like Minecraft or Halo or something like that. And that's not what a hackerspace is for. You can do that at home. Yeah.
And then I think we got some more questions.
So the biggest problem that I had with our space was we got a space put together, and then I went, okay, let's do something. And everyone went, what are we going to do? And we all stared at each other. So I expected people, once we got a space put together, that everyone would go, oh, this is great, let's build something. And what I found is everybody went, hey, let's get back and play Minecraft for a while. You know, it was like they got to play around and relax, which is a great thing to have that space for. But I looked at it as, we've got an opportunity to build something really cool, let's go for it. And exactly.
Look at the label on the back of the shirt, right? Learn, teach, party. At the very beginning, the first 2 months of Unallocated, it was all party.
All right, you know, it was like a fucking frat house. The amount of Jaeger we would go through, and the amount of booze we would go through on a daily basis, I thought we were going to die. And because it was all party at the beginning, it was not hack. I mean, we would do little projects along the way, but it was much more of a party space at the very beginning. And I think that kind of set the tone for a little while. We were more focused on the party aspect than the let's hack cool shit up. Two of the projects that I remember the most fondest are when Hunter brought in these whole point of sale things from McDonald's, and it was all about credit card swiping things. And we wanted to just figure out how they talk to each other and stuff like that. We didn't end up doing anything with it. As a matter of fact, I think we ended up disassembling everything and stapling them all to the fucking wall or something like that. After we got done pulling them apart and looking at all the chip stuff, we ended up stapling them to the wall or something. But it was a neat experience. We hacked that up. The other thing that I remember fondly was our let's break the speed of sound barrier with a Nerf gun. And we were actually able to break the speed of sound twice, and we got it on record with an actual modified Nerf gun. We actually were able to break the sound barrier. It was the coolest thing we ever did. And once we broke the sound, it was done. And, you know, we broke the sound barrier once. We don't have to do it again. But it was a great project, and those are probably two of the fondest stuff I recall. It's about consistency. If you're not hacking, you're doing it wrong.
I just want to say that because I met Joey through the ashes of the other space he's talking about. He's being very polite. It was not a benevolent dictator. It was Mad King George.
Mad King George.
You had no idea what was going on because they built it off if I have the space, everybody will come here and do something great. And then there were no rules. You had people working on equipment while they were under the influence of alcohol.
Yep.
You had people partying and then this guy's like, oh, we need to get an intern. We have a college intern. It's like, for what? To sit in a room that's just pretty much a room. So he's right. But the best thing is that it actually put the right people together to form what is Nova Labs, which is it's a really good place to be.
I think that particular situation actually comes very close to Noisebridge for aggregate fucked upness.
If you read the thread,
the only problem is we can't tell the story because the guy will sue us all.
That is correct.
But that's the important point to carry away from that is there is benevolent dictator, which is very rare. Very rare. I can't do benevolent dictator. I end up becoming a tyrant. And then there's Mad King George. And most, yeah. And that's the thing. Most of the people who have that like tremendous vision and are incredibly charismatic and everybody follows them and goes into, building a space with, that person 99 times out of 100 turns into Mad King George. And you got to watch out for that. That's why it's always better to work in pairs, to work in like groups of 2 or 3, where the 3 of you have that same consistent vision, and then work towards. If you want to build a hackerspace, the best thing you can do is find somebody else that's just as excited about it as you are and has that crazy vision all in.
Yeah, it's kind of, you have to have complementary crazy, with your board members and stuff like that. You can't be all psychotic in the same way because you just end up, killing each other.
I actually had a vice president. We had a whole group. So it wasn't that I was the only one running anything. I'm not trying to take credit for that. Myself and Steve Line actually came up with, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we had a hackerspace? So that was, we actually had a treasurer, we had a secretary, the whole 9 yards. So it's not that I was the only guy running everything. We actually had a consensus. You'd stand outside and go, what are we going to do today? How are we going to pay for all this? How's this going to work? So
we're getting the signal to wrap up. There was one last question. You can answer it quick, we will.
Last question. The gentleman in the 3rd row.
So I've seen a number of common problems with hackerspaces. Storage eventually becomes a problem, whether it's waste or good.
One man's trash is another man's treasure.
Yeah. Well, there is that problem as well. But I won't go into that. Another problem we have is technical problems like getting access sensors to work and stuff like that. Finances are another problem. Is there any interest in setting up a common organization to help hackerspaces manage these things? And is there anything that anyone in this room would like to see in an organization like that?
That every other hackerspace comes up with that brilliant idea of having a central collaborating space that everybody could, honestly, if that's what you're, but seriously, right, exactly, and everyone, if that's, the people that have come closest to that are the Chaos VPN guys that are primarily run out of, right, yeah, I mean, not in terms of like the occupancy sensors and the tech.
More making sure you have your books going right.
Right.
Which is actually a great help.
If you're looking at getting any of the 501c3, even getting your book started, the School Factory is a good resource on that, because in order for you to get 501c3 umbrella support through them, they want your books to be right so they don't have to do more work.
Well, actually, I meant for hackerspaces that already exist, like Hacking City.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever gonna happen.
Don't say that. I mean, it's something that has to be attempted 1,000 times to come up with the one.
And we always said in unallocated was this: if you came up with a project idea, you better fucking own it. Honestly, if you think idea X is a great idea for all hackerspaces, go out and build it. All right, don't wait for other people to necessarily join along. If you have a great idea, you got to own it and build it. I mean, that you got to go forward with it.
And to clarify just real quick a little bit, what I'm really addressing here is people often come in and they say, how can I help you guys out and donate something? And then at HackDC, for instance, up until very recently, basically most, if not all of those donations went straight to either a bank account and stayed there or a general fund. And I'm not sure that being so focused on finances is really helpful to our mission. So I'm wondering if from the pooling resources, sort of technical and otherwise, or creating some sort of organization to help in the hackerspaces might help.
I think the best way you can help a hackerspace is to go to the hackerspace and hack, rather than focusing on, going, what can I do to donate stuff to your hackerspace, to help your hackerspace? Come to the hackerspace and hack something. That's how you can help the hackerspace.
I've actually built a number of those things, but they seem to be common problems, and every hackerspace finds their own solution.
And that is what they should do. Every hackerspace should find their own solution, because that's how you learn. And I think with that, we're done. So thank you guys very much.